The Sydney Swans find themselves outside the top 8. Their 2-point win over the Bulldogs on Thursday night still keeps them in the hunt for finals. It's a long shot, but stranger things have happened. However, it's been an inconsistent season on the field and with injuries, but their season continues on a clear trend since 2000. The common theme in all these grand finals is the margin. It's 40 or more points in every single one. In fact, 11 grand finals from the year 2000 onwards have ended in these type of blowouts. To have nearly half of the last 23 grand finals without close affairs is strange enough, but the trend evolves the season after. The loser of the grand final is the second best side that year, so if we predict Sydney miss out on the 8 this year, it will make 7 of the 11 sides to lose a grand final by 40 plus points miss finals the next year. It well and truly could be 8 of the 11 if the Bulldogs didn't miraculously sneak in the finals last year by 0.5%. Out of the 11 sides, Sydney in 2015 finished 4th, the highest of the group, but even they went out in straight sets due to losses against Fremantle and North Melbourne. The other 3 sides, in the Saints in 2011, Eagles in 2016, and Bulldogs in 2022, got knocked out in elimination finals. No side from the 11 has ever made it to a prelim final the following year, or even won a single final. Stats Insider investigated the results of both premiers and runners-up the season after the grand final since 1898. This larger scale of research found a similar trend, that the success of the runner-up the next year is far lower than the winner. One of its main conclusions was that 30% of runners-up don't even make finals the next year. That's roughly 1 in 3 from 1898 to 2020. The closing thoughts on the research and their impact on the current day AFL were, quote, "Still, the numbers do suggest that in the modern era, teams who lose grand finals are finding it harder to bounce back than they did in the past. This makes sense if we look at the 11 sides who had heavy losses in the grand final since 2000. It's impossible to find an exact reason why this happens, as every one of the 11 teams has their own unique challenges and circumstances that cause them to flatline the following year. But there are some possibilities that are plausible for why a side struggled the next year. The psychological element is glaring in these losses. To be so close to the ultimate success, but then to be found out on the day can be completely demoralising. Pre-season, the home and away schedule, and a month of finals is as gruelling a campaign as there is in world sport. To muster it up and come back just as fit mentally is challenging. It's also a coach's nightmare. Do they bring up the events that cause deep pain, or do they try to move on and look to the future? Luke Beveridge didn't know after the 2021 loss, and after his loss against Fremantle in the elimination final, he still wasn't sure how strong the impact on his team was.
Coming out of the last year, I was hoping that probably the trauma of the grand final wouldn't have any lasting effects, and it's difficult to understand any sort of magnitude with that, whether it did or whether it didn't.
We saw the disaster that happened with Adelaide, who tried to bring up the wounds of the loss and make their players mentally tougher, but it ended up breaking the club apart, and they have just recovered in the past few years. Becoming physically ready the next year is another factor. Playing in the final game of the year already puts you back a month compared to most other teams. Off-season is the obvious time to get surgery, go on holidays, and have time off the grueling physical demands. This is also more challenging when you're older. It was seen with the 2004 Lions team that was simply exhausted, and with the beat-up players for the Giants in 2019 and Saints in the 2010 rematch. To repair and refuel the body in time for the next year's pre-season when you're already a month behind is incredibly demanding. The other simple reason is that other sides just get better. If you finish second for the season, it's likely that the team's salary cap is pretty full. The draft picks you have for the upcoming draft are lower, and it's unlikely you have much less flexibility or currency to trade key players in. It leaves a side that lost heavily in a grand final relatively similar. It's hard to evolve as a team and bring in new dimensions to the playing squad that can immediately impact the following year. Even if we look at the Swans Thursday night team, we can see this. Every one of the players that played against the Bulldogs was already on the list the previous year. With the above factors, limiting time to recover, having a full pre-season, and simply being mentally prepared for another year, it also challenges teams to develop their young players. It seems as if the trend from 2000 will continue on with the Swans again this year, but the one takeaway from the data is if you ever get to a grand final, you must make the most of it. If not, the mental fortitude and ability to physically play the same standard the next year is hard to repeat, often taking teams years to be contending once again.
A rich man well.